to what extent should we try to come into touch with cosmic cycles?
Well, I guess the first question that comes to mind is exactly what cosmic cycles are we talking about here?
Yeah, on what scale?
All the cosmic cycles, the alternation of day and night, the change of the seasons, the periods of the moon, different astronomical events, all of them, from the ones we see every day to the ones that are yearly occurrences to rarer things like eclipses. To what extent should we try to come into touch with these things?
Well, I went out last night at 1 a.m., which was reportedly the right time, to see if that broken up asteroid was going to create a historical kind of firestorm of streaks across the sky, but I didn't see anything like that. And it turns out it was, I think 25 to 50 per hour at certain points, which is enough to watch, but it's not spectacular.
Well, I have been known more than once to go to a resort in upstate New York simply on the occasion of the annual Perseid meteor shower.
Yeah.
Because it's so impressive. I mean, it's beautiful.
When does that happen?
Early August.
Early August, all right. Yeah, that must be the one I saw when I was outdoors during high school, something like that. Because I was stunned.
Well,
we had ridden our bicycles out to sneak in over the fence of the drive-in theater and see, I guess it was Marilyn Monroe expose her breasts on screen, but our attention got moved to the skies.
Which was more of a show?
Well, it was more impressive. I mean, it was nice, to see her with fewer clothes on, but so what?
All right, well, back to the question. There sure are a lot of things like that to look for and pay attention to. It seems to me the real question is, to what degree do they have a demonstrable effect on one's life, or perhaps one's daily life? And I don't think generally they have much.
Yeah, I mean, the seasons, it's hard not to have a connection to, because every season we modify our behavior accordingly. And I like to keep an eye on Mercury retrograde sometimes.
Yes, no, I pay attention to Mercury retrograde. And generally there isn't much to do with astrology because it's not really about being predictive.
Yeah, and
Well,
I'm not sure Western astrology is that well connected to psychology, which would make it useful. I think it is useful a little bit.
Well, I have used a Vedic astrology and a Vedic astrologer on at least one occasion. I find these things interesting and possibly informative, but I think in general one can spend a lot of time looking at things that really don't matter much. I mean, I've been with people who've gotten all wound up because Pluto is in Scorpio.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what to do about that.
Yeah.
Well, y'all took this in a very different way than I anticipated because, everyone who's a Muslim and is practicing is very much in touch with the cosmic cycles. You pray either 3 or 5 times a day, and it's depending on the position of the sun.
Well, the answer to that one's pretty clear.
Right. You celebrate certain holidays, Ramadan or Eid, depending on sightings of the moon, for instance. So all all Muslims actually are still to a certain extent in touch with the cosmic cycles. And this is something that most ancient faiths and even early Christians were very much in touch with this. And I think it's a good thing, not in terms of, astrology or anything, certainly not the modern degenerated astrology, but to be in touch with the change of the moon or the change of the earth as it goes around the sun is a good thing. It's being in touch with our home and how it changes over time and how we change with it.
Well, and it makes us much more full participants in this life that we find ourselves in. It's, it's beneficial to believe that you're part of something, really big and that you can't control. But, the regular day and night cycle is easy to connect to. But I don't know how important it is in terms of a particular spiritual practice. I think it may be good for awareness. I think it may be a kind of remembrance, even. I like those cycles. I often don't pay enough attention to them, but I like them.
Wait a minute, pay attention to what?
Cycles, like day and night and all the others. It's sort of like each level of the cosmos breathes at a different rate. And it's kind of nice to be aware of it when it is. But I don't know if it has great methodological significance or anything.
Right.
I mean, I think one's attitude towards things spiritually does have a great impact on one's spiritual practice.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I think, if one has the attitude of, the sun and moon are divine, that, there's a spiritual reality called Artemis behind the moon and Helios or Apollo behind the sun, that completely changes one's outlook upon the world compared to believing that the moon is a dead rock and the sun is a ball of combusting gas.
Yeah. Well, and, there's no reason to believe that various things that occur in our world are disconnected from those cycles. And sometimes when you can't explain something, you can think, well, maybe it's, those influences that I am not so aware of. I kind of think of wars that way. It's something that Gurdjieff said, that it's just planetary influences. But we do have, you know about that book that was written about 80-year cycles of history repeating itself, or of society going through, a certain cycle of phases?
Yes.
I can't remember what it's called, but various people have been impressed by it. And I heard an explanation of it today, a simplified explanation that actually made good sense.
Today?
Today, this very day, yes. It had to do with, if you start counting at a time when there's great turmoil, usually war, then the next generation says, we're making the world better. And then the generation after that says, what was it? It's like, oh, well, I'm really not getting the satisfaction out of life that I wanted to. And then the last phase is, we're going to just be in it for the money. And that's the point at which social order begins to erode and fall apart, and then you have your new crisis. I mean, it kind of seems to fit.
All right, and what drives the 80-year cycle?
I don't have any idea. No causality was mentioned. I think it's descriptive rather than accounting for the actual causes.
Well, too bad.
Yeah, well, you can see that how reaction between generations to different conditions is going to perhaps lead to different behavior. So it kind of makes sense. And of course, it's not always exactly the same. Our crisis may turn out to be climate rather than war.
Yes.
But we're due for one. It's about 80 years since the beginning of World War II. I mean, there's nothing magical about 80. It's really just like 4 generations. But even if one generation stuck with what the previous generation was doing, there's probably still a process going on. Things are going to continue to change. I like those kinds of theories of civilizational rhythms and periods and things. I don't know what to do with them practically, but I like them. It implies that there's more meaning than might be apparent, even if it doesn't communicate what that meaning is.
So back to Seda Badria's point, I'm not really sure what to do with that. Yes, the times of prayer are determined by the sun.
Yeah.
Ramadan is determined by the moon, but Ramadan isn't about the moon.
No, it's not. But it's a what is it? 13 moon phases or something?
Right.
Or is it 12? Well, the fact that it moves so fast, it probably is 12. It does get earlier and earlier, doesn't it? But it's still cosmological in the sense
Yes.
that it's synchronized with the new moon.
Yes.
Approximately every year.
Well, Sheikh al-Bashir, you said Ramadan's not about the moon, but think about it. Every Muslim culture and society has used the crescent moon as their flag and symbol. So isn't it possible that Islam is really a secret lunar cult? Because, I mean, seriously, just look at the symbolism there. If Christians are wearing the cross, and the cross is their symbol and the moon is the Muslim symbol, then maybe, Allah is a secret moon god.
Well, maybe.
I guess I just don't see how that informs one's practice.
Well, it doesn't. But being aware that there are cycles that you're not paying attention to is an occasion to be present and, pay attention.
Right. Which cycles?
Well, whichever ones you realize that you're not paying attention to.
I mean, it's not so much how they inform the practice, it's that it is the essence of the practice, really. Because, just look to the Old Testament. I mean, Yahweh, might have been a jealous God of monotheists, but in the Old Testament, it's clear that Yahweh was one among many gods. The reality on the ground was a polytheistic one, but the ritual, the alternation of the seasons, the rhythms in the life, the food restrictions, all of these things, might seem to our modern sentiments to be extremely unimportant, trivial matters that can be thrown away. But the reality is some of these actually are the most important parts of the faith and the practice, not because there's some sort of intrinsic meaning in, let's say, not eating pork, but there's an important part of that restriction that helps one in their spiritual practice. It's not about the purity of the ideological part of it, but it's that these things.
It's an exercise in self-discipline. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, it can be that, but
Reducing it down to something that I don't feel comfortable with.
Okay. Well,
I mean, if it was just about exercising self-discipline, you could say, well, any modern atheist that's, you know, on a special diet is exercising self-discipline. It comes down to more than that. It's saying, you know, I refuse to subjugate myself before that which is human and man-made, and instead I stand in awe and reverence before that which is unseen and unknowable, the divine. And sometimes, and I think, you know, Kierkegaard makes a good point of this, that which is most nonsensical in the Bible is that which is most important. I mean, what more ridiculous than Abraham coming close to sacrificing his own son? But that really, in many respects, is the essence of the faith. It's sacrificing one's own will upon the altar of the divine.
Exactly. You must lose your life to save it.
And I'm not saying that all of the weird stuff in religion necessarily is important, but I know as time has gone on, all these things that I thought, let's get rid of it, these are old, cultural-based, time-bound things. Some of them might be, but some of them might be so important that if you throw them away, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Sure. Well, and I don't know there's been any religion that hasn't basically had a religious calendar synchronized to sun and moon and equinoxes and stuff like that. And you know, one of the nice things about those kinds of cycles or events are that it's nice to realize that there's something going on that affects you that's impersonal. Although certain belief systems may attribute a being with will behind some of them, it's still not about you. Sometimes it's nice to remember that all the stuff that's going on is cosmic and so much bigger than me that I maybe ought to have a little humility.
Yes, humility is a good thing.
So I hear.
and also about taking a leap of faith. You know, if there's something completely irrational in your faith, and you jump into that irrationally because of faith, maybe that's important, you know, because if everything was rationally provable, well, then there's not much faith in that now, is there?
No, and there's not that much value in having the learning from the experience of it.
Right,
because, yeah, you could just have it completely explained. You could just, you know, forego the experience.
And that's where the liberal Protestants and the Unitarian Universalists and, you know, even modern Muslims, they all go wrong. You can't, I mean, Muhammad Assad did this translation of the Quran where he did a massive commentary trying to explain everything away rationally, and he thought that would improve the faith and make it more palatable to people, and maybe it did, but it also, for me at least, got rid of everything that makes the faith worthwhile. If you rationalize religion, then you might as well just be a rationalist. I mean,
right. Well, are you not in fact a rationalist?
Oh, absolutely not.
No. I mean, if you rationalize religion.
Right. But I'm saying you put a rationalized religion and science next to one another, science is always going to win. Unless you have some sort of nostalgia or whatnot. But the essence of religion is in those things that are unexplainable, intangible, and frankly, not based on either sense perception nor rationalism or rational thought, but are from that third dimension of intuition.
Yes, agreed.
Anyway, I'll get to the next one now. What are some of the strangest and most surprising things you have experienced in the years since you started seeking?
Wow.
Strangest.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of it too much in terms of strange, other than the fact that when I first came to Bloomington looking for Sufism, I spent some time at the ashram and talking to the head of the ashram. What was his name? Schumacher? Maybe? Anyway. And that was strange. That was strange and a little creepy. Surprising. I think I've had a lot of little surprises, but I don't know about big ones.
Well, maybe I'm not in the right vein here.
Yeah.
Could somebody else answer this question first?
Since it's my question, I'll answer it first, simply to help you guys out. And
Yeah.
I'll just say, let's say one of the strangest things that happened was one time, that was about 13 years ago now. I had a little zawiya in Maryland, and I had some Turkish lights and everything, and I had Sidi Sultan and Sidi Hassan over, and we were invoking. And as we were invoking, all the lights in the room went out. And I'm not talking a circuit breaker popping, but actually all the lights themselves died.
Oh, neat.
Without the circuit breaker flipping. So that was interesting. It was powerful. And then in terms of surprising, I would say the most surprising thing is that sometimes the things that I have resisted the most and most powerfully have actually come back to me later as the things that have affected me the most deeply. So, at one point I'm like, oh, no. I don't like this. This is not good. And then later on, I realized, oh, that which I resisted is actually coming up from behind, biting me in the neck like a vampire and saying, you know what? You were wrong. I was right. And I become really a patron of the view that I was antagonizing against. So that's surprising. So that's my answer.
Good answer.
Yeah. Well, and we may resist things because we're not quite ready to learn from them.
Well, yes, I think that's often true.
Yes. So when it comes around again, if you can see it freshly, you may discover what you missed before.
Well, I guess the spiritual life has been just so full of surprising things or wonderful things and people. It's just sort of hard to identify what's at the top of the list.
Yeah. Well, discovering that religion was worth giving some attention to was surprising, remember?
Yes, I think that was very surprising. Who would have thought?
Yeah, exactly.
Sayyida Zainab, how about you?
Well, I think I've got nothing to compare with Sayyida Badria's experience, but I have heard the story, I think, from Sidi Hassan himself, and I was curious to know, was this at his zawiya or was it somewhere else?
It was at my zawiya.
I see, in Maryland.
In Maryland, when I lived there. The first time I lived there, prior to moving overseas.
Right. I remember him sharing this experience with me, and I was as amazed as I was today again.
Yep.
Did the lights seem to briefly get brighter before they all went out?
Yeah, but only for a split second, and
That's
then
right. Yeah,
yeah.
that could be all it takes. And even if I come up with a physical explanation for it, it's still an amazing experience.
Right. Well, I can't, other than having the chandelier fall off the light in the middle of the Hudra. You were there for that.
I was?
Oh, you must have been.
Well, where was it?
It was one Sunday on the farm with Sheikh Abu Bakr.
Oh, yeah, I do remember something falling down. I'm not clear on what it was now.
Fell off the ceiling, landed right in the middle of the circle of dancing, and we just danced on.
Was it the little shoji box that surrounded the light?
Yes, it was the shoji box that surrounded the light. It was about 4 by 2, I think, and it just fell to the floor, and we just danced on.
Yeah, yeah, why not?
And yes, I'm sure there've been a number of strange things, but none of them come to mind at this very moment.
What about you, Saida Zainab?
Yeah, I'm still trying to recollect, but I think it would probably be the time when I was in England, and at that time I was so confused about which religion to follow, and I was kind of praying to do different gods, not knowing whether what I'm doing is right. And I remember a snowstorm appearing from nowhere. And in England, it doesn't snow as much as it does in New York, hardly ever. But on that night, it was a storm that pretty much lasted for 2 days. And I was quite taken back by it. Because England is always gloomy, because of the snow, it was even more dark. So for that day and the next day, there was barely any sunlight. And I still remember that experience in that day.
Yeah. When was that?
This was December 2011.
Huh, all right.
And it doesn't snow that much. I mean, it barely snows in London.
Yeah, I remember hearing some news about a really atypical winter storm. And it might have been around then.
Right.
That's the one everybody talked about forever.
Forever?
Probably.
Well, yeah, effectively.
Well, we're still talking about it.
Look at that. We are indeed.
You know, I'd actually, I have a question, you know, that's not directly related to this, but that I'm curious to ask Saida Zainab, because you said at that time you were essentially torn between 2 religions and praying to 2 separate gods.
Mm-hmm.
How did it feel for you when you ended up choosing one path? Did you feel more like it was the acceptance of one God into your life, or a rejection of the other one, or both, or neither?
So I don't think it's either or. I think it's more about my attachment to the rituals that I was brought up with, right? I was following a ritualistic approach, and only the ritualistic approach to the religion that I was born into. And with that, it became mundane. It became a routine more than a spiritual or a religious obligation. Because in Hinduism, there are many ways to pray to God, not just one. So during that time when I was exploring Islam, it took me almost a month to get through this phase, to overcome this phase. And I think it was more the belief in one God that grew stronger and stronger over time, that I felt like, you know, in Islam, being one of the few religions that accepts the validity of every other religion that came before it, you can't go wrong. So that was my convincing answer, that I convinced myself that what I'm doing is the right thing and I should continue doing that.
Yeah, and there is something compelling about the divine unity.
Yes, indeed.
And I mean, I would say some form of universalism has been espoused by the greatest saints of all the religions. Unfortunately, the lesser spirits and lesser minds have tended to be exclusivistic. A lot of the greatest saints, especially the earlier ones of Christianity, were quite universalistic. They now actually, ironically, some of the greatest and earliest Christian saints who are still revered as saints, you know, the hidden secret in their doctrine is actually that modern day Christians would consider them heretics for being universalists.
Yeah.
And then too many Muslims, unfortunately, will say, you know, make excuses to say, oh yeah, our universalism only encompasses the Ahl Kitab, and even then it's only like you can marry people from these different faiths, but they're not really believers in the true sense of the word. And it all gets very old after a time.
After a short time, I think.
Very short time.
Yeah, I don't think it takes too long for people to form an identity around something like, especially like religion.
Yes, that's it, to form an identity.
And then anything that seems to lessen it, you know, like there can be
like other people having a different opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, you've got to resist that because your belief is who you are, you know. But it always happens. Religion always gets more exoteric.
Yes, that's right. Unfortunately. Right.
There's a cycle.
There's a cycle. Yeah,
you know,
indeed.
Modern day religion is not that far off from European football clubs, in the sense that you're partisans of a specific group of people. You care who wins and who loses, but you don't really have anything invested in the actual outcomes. And you know, in Europe, especially in places like the Balkans, people get violent over sports, over football teams, just like people get violent over religion, despite the fact that they don't have, you know, their boots on the ground. They're, you know, I mean, some of the people that I have found to be most violently and militantly Christian or most militantly Muslim are not actually practicing Christians or practicing Muslims in the true sense of the word. It's just very much their religion is their religious militancy, let's just say, rather than the actual religion.
It allows them to be right.
No, you're right. It's very much like those who are strong supporters of a particular football club.
Yeah,
There's
I mean,
same
really,
flavor to it.
yeah.
Now, the
Maybe
next
less-
one. Yes.
Maybe less alcohol, and maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe the religious side has less alcohol, and maybe that's a
I
bad
see. I see.
Right.
Yeah, no religious tailgate parties.
That's right.
Now the next question is a question about practice, and it's a practice that I call whack-a-mole. But is spiritual whack-a-mole, namely paying attention to immoral, undesirable, etc. thoughts, and every time they pop up, attacking them, a valid spiritual practice? And is it something that can be helpful for some people?
It might be a phase.
Finally, I think one has to be aware of those things, but attacking them takes entirely too much energy.
Right.
One can't go along with them, but one doesn't have to invest one's time and energy and resources in attacking one's own qualities. One can only notice them and not cooperate with them.
Yeah, exactly. Not take them so seriously that they seem to be an enemy who must be fought at the moment.
Yes.
Just, stand apart from it, not get sucked in.
Right.
It's good to see all those things when they pop up.
Oh, yes, no, of course it's good to see them. And one should be on the lookout for them.
Well, and even grateful to see them, or, to have been shown them.
Yes, and one can even interrogate them and find out where they come from.
Yeah, you can do some of that.
And that may be informative, but to declare war on them is an entirely useless process.
Having an enemy is almost always a mistake.
It's just like with whack-a-mole, and that's another reason I called it this, is because it's counterproductive. The more you're warring against something in your own psyche, the more that you're fixated and focused on that negative quality, and the more that negative quality is going to pop up. So, as you mentioned, both of you actually, the best thing I think to do is to be aware, have awareness of this, investigate it, know where it's coming from, try to inquire why is it coming there, and see where it goes. Follow what direction it's going in, and then maybe just not repress it, but ignore it.
Yeah, drop it.
Yeah, and fill that empty space with something more profitable, because essentially, and this is something that some of Dostoevsky's works talked about. The more that you have some sort of spiritual disease and attack that spiritual disease, the more that spiritual disease will be manifested in you and actually take over. So you have to be careful.
That's because you're giving it all that attention.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. You're identified with having that thing as an enemy, and it sucks you in because another mole will just pop up. I remember when I ran into a whack-a-mole game and played it, and I was thrilled. I loved it. But it was, after all, a game, and I never got rid of those gophers, or those moles, whatever they were.
I haven't played it that often, but I certainly remember playing it and enjoying it.
Yeah. For one thing, it requires a kind of alertness.
Right.
That's nice to have, nice to see as possible.
Well, do you think Santa Padre is suggesting we can have that kind of alertness as a value as watching our vices materialize?
Well, I think we should try to have that alertness so that when the things pop up, we notice them and realize their relativity.
Yes.
I mean, these things happen in awareness, so you might as well be aware.
Yes.
And be the awareness rather than the thing that pops into the awareness.
Well, I think a lot of spiritual diseases have a root cause. So think about it this way. If let's say someone has a vice, some sort of drugs or alcohol or whatever, if they give into it, that's obviously not good. But on the other hand, if they fight it strongly, very often they're going to feel repressed, and then if not at that moment, then later on give into it even more strongly. But if they practice some sort of spiritual inquiry, they might find out that the desire for, let's say, this substance is not an innate desire for that substance, but there's something deeper within one's psyche that's causing that, some sort of memory or event or something. And if you can understand that, sometimes simply having that understanding allows one to not necessarily conquer, because it's not a conquering, but just travel further along the path and leave it by the wayside.
Yeah.
Well said. Agreed. I think that's nicely formulated.
Let's do one last question today, which is, to what extent, considering that they are also of the God substance, are inanimate objects alive?
Well, they are part of that God substance.
Yeah. Are our fingernails alive? But they're, they have a place in, each of our lives. They appear to be necessary for life's processes to go on, so that you can't disconnect them. And they require life to exist. So they're part of life. They may not have an individual life.
This is an intermediate possibility, the fingernail.
Well, I just thought of something that, was part of a living being and that didn't really seem to be alive.
So as you all know, been working on this book, and I'm writing the last couple of chapters right now, dealing with things like cosmology, ontology, and eschatology. And the way I formulate it, and I spend a lot more time on it than this, but in simplistic terms, the way I formulate it is this: that there are many manifestations of the divine, but at the root of the cosmos, beyond time, beyond being, that there's a primordial fire. Now, everything, call it what you want, Allah, God, whatever, it's this indescribable essence that permeates all that exists. Now, everything that is fiery, otherwise it wouldn't exist, but the degree of being that something has is dependent on how connected and how fiery it is. So the great gods and goddesses, or the manifestations of God, would in fact be closer to this primordial essence. We, as conscious beings, at least some of us, have quite a bit of this fire. But even rocks, even rocks, which you would say, well, that's just a rock, it's not conscious, it's not living, even that, I would say, is alive. Without a connection to the primordial fire, it would not exist. It would not be at all. And so for one who is a true mystic, that rock, even though it's just a simple rock, pulses with the divine heartbeat. And if you can learn, and for me, that's the essence of the spiritual path. It's easy to get into touch with things that are higher life forms. But if you can find God, even in a rock, if you can feel God pulsing, literally like blood flowing through the veins, through that rock, then you know that everything that is holy and is divine. So that's my spiel.
Yeah, well, the rock has a form which expresses something bigger than it. And, you can look at the qualities of a rock and consider them to be expressions of divine qualities, whether you see the connection immediately or not. I think properties in the physical world sort of are like divine attributes in the spiritual world, or like
calling it a fire gives it a certain intelligibility.
Yes, it does. And because fire is alive.
Yeah, and the analogy is easily understood, and fire connects to fire, and that's a good term. I mean, this is where so many people have struggled trying to find a term, and every culture has one.
Yeah.
And modernists try other things. I'm thinking of Whitehead's undifferentiated aesthetic continuum, Tillich's ground of being,
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good one, actually.
And I very much like David Boehm's The Implicate Order.
Well, yeah,
But the fire analogy is a good one.
it is. It's that out of which that phoenix arises.
Yes, the one that's joined us for this very call.
Yes.
Well, I mean, and that's a whole other topic, but I think the essence of religion really is resurrection. I mean, aren't we all, unless we're dead, resurrected every moment? And that's the point. And I think, we need to stop having this conceit that Christians have a monopoly on being born again. I mean, I know that theologically there's a specific meaning of that term within their tradition, but if you can get outside of the whole, Southern Baptist born again thing, I actually like that term. We're born again every single moment,
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
Yes, and that's what all of the doctrines of monotheism say. I mean, people have the mistaken idea that God started the world sometime in the ancient past and has just gone on from there. But
Yeah.
all of the Western monotheisms are explicit about God creates the world at every moment.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, Meister Eckhart said that, and I remember many years ago, after I had first found the Sharika, there was this television series called The Long Search.
Oh yes, right. I remember that.
And one of the things that really struck me was when the person exploring all these things was at an Orthodox Easter, and he was very impressed. And he said that he talked to the priest and the priest said, if we really knew what, if we really understood, if we really saw, Easter is every day.
Yes, that's right.
And,
yeah, that's right. Easter is every day.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure if it was C.S. Lewis or G.K. Chesterton. I think this one might have been Chesterton, but it was the best and actually just simplest explanation of that entire idea of divine omniscience and free will versus destiny. He said, people think that God exists within time. God doesn't exist within time. God is outside of time. But then when people say, but if God knows everything that's going to happen, if God is omniscient and omnipotent, then how can there be free will? Well, because God exists outside of time. So when someone makes a choice, God experiences that choice at that moment, because every single moment is the eternal now for the divine.
Yeah. And ideally it would be
now.
for us.
There is no past or future for God. Everything is now for God. The past and future are constructs that allow manifestation to actually happen.
Yeah. Somebody said, time is God's way of making sure everything doesn't happen at once.
Right.
It's another way to allow for contradiction and opposing pairs, because instead of destroying each other, they get their turn. You can't have certain things occupying the same space at the same time. That space is quite available within time. There's going to be a time when you can be in that space.
Mm-hmm.